For being low tier, no one should underestimate a perfectly trained Gardevoir with a diverse moveset. The first move is known to be as Side Shock. Side Shock is a very devastating move that can cause a phase shift within 3 direct hits. Not to mention this thing can cause insane amount of chip damage to the person decides to block the attack. Not to mention it's a very diverse move in certain cases when you ever want to use it, but Gardevoir would end up using it to predict your opponent's movements in certain matters. Because one of the weaknesses of said Side Shock is that this move is very unsafe if planned inappropriately. For example, if an opponent try to counterattack you, this attack is very prone to counterattack because it can leave the user wide open. Because Gardevoir is not that good when it comes to recoil back to position A, leaving herself vulnerable to either counterattacks or normal attacks. But her bread and butter, and mostly in most Gardevoir setups, is the use of her Calm Mind. Calm Mind is a unique move that allows Gardevoir to stack these Calm Mind strides around her body. We'll talk about those strides in a moment, but Calm Mind actually acts as other variety of moves known as, I call them secondary moves. Her first secondary move is known as Energy Ball. Energy Ball is one of Gardevoir's unique moves that casts a ball of pure grass energy. The reason why I call it unique is that this Energy Ball can burst if it gets hit with a projectile attack, and not to mention also it has much more versatility in certain phases. Say for example you cast an Energy Ball right now. In dual phase, I can send it by pressing Y, I can send it vertically, catching any opponent that decided to jump the Energy Ball, catching them off guard. It can also work for field phase. As you can see, I can use this move to be able to counter field phase to cover more ground and catch opponents that are trying to outmaneuver me. But one thing that's most powerful about Calm Mind is the use of her Psychic attack. Psychic is a very powerful attack that Gardevoir acts when using Calm Mind with the X button. This thing's very powerful, but it's a prediction move, meaning that this attack is powerful, but Gardevoir cannot be injured when you use the attack. The main reason why is that it revolves around Gardevoir's concentration. If she gets injured while casting a Calm Mind, she won't be able to complete the attack. It's kind of like Future Sight. If she gets injured, she won't be able to cast out the attack because she'll lose her concentration. So most often, for best scenarios, use Psychic to like a longer distance, like maybe in field phase or in dual phase. It's a very powerful attack, but you have to be very careful. Now we just move on to our next cool thing that I like about is her Dazzling Gleam attack. Even though it doesn't really look like a Dazzling Gleam, but more like a barrier, this barrier is actually really good when casting a main use of defense. This is actually for opponents that are going to try to get in and attack you most of the time. There's going to be some of the times that it can be used for offense, like if you were using a support set that evolved around offensive capabilities like Cubone or Yveltal, it cause a lot of chip damage. Next what we have is Teleport. Teleport's very unique in a way because it's basically stated in the name. Using Calm Mind, Gardevoir can instantly teleport side by side or away from opponents. Next we have is Gardevoir's Store Power. This is the move I was talking about, that these Calm Mind stacks are very important. This move starts weak at first, but the more Calm Minds you stack, the more powerful it becomes. As you see with 2 Calm Minds stacked, it actually does more damage. But with the max of 3 stacked, it does even twice or even triple the amount of its original damage output. Most people are very reasonably thinking that this actually is the most menacing move because of the fact if Gardevoir has this in stock, it could be very dangerous to get caught off guard with. This is another unique move I really like to know about, is that this is known to be as Moonblast. This is one of Gardevoir's Charge A attacks. Like Braixen's Sunny Day, this move is actually much powerful and it can be cancelled. This move is basically just in the name. Gardevoir charges a powerful attack that sends the opponent flying into any phase that he wants. They can instantly send anybody into any phase because of how powerful it is. And like this attack, it can be cancelled, while timing it right. It's very unique in a way. The more punishing move was actually known to be as Pedal Dance. This move is very good in some cases, but it can be punished most of the time. It's good with range, and it does have a lot more versatility. Because in most cases, in dual phase and field phase, it differentiates. In dual phase, it's a big beam of petal. But as in field phase, you're going to be hit with a barrage of petals, compared to dual phase when you get hit with a full barrage of a petal blast. So you can tell the difference between the two. And the one thing I need to talk about too is Future Sight. Future Sight is one of Gardevoir's zoning methods. Since we talked about Psychic being one of zoning method number A, this is zoning method number B. Future Sight is a move that Gardevoir can cast down an attack to predict where his opponent's going to land, and it will trigger like a trip mine. One thing unique about this attack is that it can be placed anywhere on the field, from in front of a few seconds in front of her, in the air, or even as far away as possible. This move has no limits on how you can use it. You can use it to defend yourself against opponents that would become aggressive, or you can actually use it to catch people in the air some of the times. But like Psychic, if Gardevoir gets injured in the attack, she can lose concentration, causing the attack to dissipate. That's why you have to be very careful when you get attacked. Now it's time to move on to my personal favorite of this section. Now we get to talk about some of Gardevoir's abilities. Her first ability I like to pull out is her high stance. Her high stance, even though it looks kind of wonky in a way, the idea of her high stance is that she can regenerate her health over short periods of time. But the best way I could demonstrate it is having this Gardevoir get injured. So after taking a considerable amount of damage, as you can see, my health is regenerating over a small period of time once using this stance. Most people don't use it, but in the competitive aspect, people do use this in an advantage if somebody does get knocked down. If their opponent gets knocked down, for example, they can just regenerate as much health as they can, just to make sure that they can be able to get as much recoverable HP back as possible. Her next move that she has is her glide. I'd call it her glide, but it's more like a hover, to be honest. It's one of Gardevoir's second jumps. This is very unique in a way and more versatile, because of the fact you can end up like spacing out your jumps or delaying some of your attacks. This actually puts a lot of pressure on opponents that are aggressive towards you, that you would decide to fly around them. It's very like trolling in a way, because you can confuse them to leaving them vulnerable to an attack. Like you can like glide for a few seconds and go straight to pedal dance, or glide straight into a counterattack. It catches them completely off guard since they're relying on such an offensive aspect. Oh, not to mention, one thing I did forget about is that Gardevoir can use glide while in the air. So that's why I tell about being so unique, because Gardevoir can use this to delay her attacks, to have the opponent keep on guessing. That's what I like about this aspect, is that no matter what opponent I face, they're so nervous of me being in the air that I can catch them off guard. But like I said, you have to really time your jumps, because some of the times you can get shot in the air if somebody has a calm mind. So try to keep in a way, like keep yourself agile and using it less. However, that doesn't really top compared to her burst form. This form can allow her to stack 2 of her calm mines at once. Within 1 calm mine, she can get 2 stacked at once. Not to mention she has access to one of her powerful burst attacks, which will show on the screen. This move is very powerful, and it's very hard to tech, because of the fact that startup frames are just almost miraculously quick, meaning that you would have to have a very quick hand to catch Gardevoir when doing a burst attack. But I think I should explain it more by being more in perma-burst for now. So as you can see, when I do a calm mine, I immediately get 2 calm mines off the bat. So meaning, if I do 2 calm mines in burst form, I get fully stacked within 2 cycles, making Gardevoir more powerful and much more of a menace in this form. And what's even more powerful is the Moon Blast she possesses. This thing is more powerful than it was and greatly enhanced. As you see in field phase, it covers the entire field, and in dual phase, it covers the entire vertical region, making it hard for you to avoid it. The only thing you can do against this attack is either block it or counter cancel it, because the fact it limits your options of avoiding it or jumping out of the way in dual phase. Not to mention, we both know is that when the Gardevoir in burst form can actually rapidly heal any health it lost earlier. And it does make it harder is that she is a technical fighter, meaning that this form lasts longer than any other character, as stated in her class. As stated is that her form can last for a longer brief period of time compared to a speedy character. A speedy character will only have maybe 5-10 seconds of burst form. She might have double the amount of time being in that form because of the fact of her class. But one thing that is powerful is that her 2x and her side arrows are very powerful at keeping opponents at a distance. But one thing we need to talk about is her devastating burst attack, which I'll talk about soon. Right here is that this attack is very hard to block. Or even tech. You can block it, but it's very hard to tech because of the fact the only thing you can do is block it because of the fact you can't grab it because it's almost instantaneous in the startup. So, without that, it seems like Gardevoir does sound like a glass cannon. But it seems in a way that we need to put that to the test. So for right now, we're going to go straight into the fun part. Alright, before these matches started, or begin at all, can we just minimize the screen real quick? I forgot to talk about this. Here's some good support sets that I think, from my perspective, is a good idea. We'll talk about as soon as the fight starts. For right now, the support set I'm actually picking right now is actually my personal favorite, Yveltal and Latios. Most often, I rely on Yveltal. The main reason why I rely on him is because I need the extra chip damage. Since Gardevoir does rely a lot on chip damage and catching the opponent off guard, I'm going to rely a lot on just chipping the opponent slowly apart. And not to mention, this thing can be combo oriented if I time it right. And some of the weaknesses that Gardevoir does have is that if she does get closed in, it can be difficult for her to bounce back. But it's not impossible. She just has to play her cards right in some factors to be able to catch an opponent back into the guessing game. It's basically, for Gardevoir's playstyle, is more on guess what move I'm going to do and how you're going to counterattack me. But the hard part about it is that it's hard for them to win this guessing game because the fact a Gardevoir would always change things up, making it hard for them to know which attack they're going to do next. And since all their attacks are future based or delayed, as you can see there. As we continue with the second round, we're going to continue spectating with this Gardevoir. Even though some of the times Gardevoir can be used offensively, it's not really advised as much, unless you know how to be able to combat it. Like for example, for Weavile would definitely want to be in Gardevoir's face, because of the fact Gardevoir doesn't really have any offensive tools against a Weavile that wants to get in close quarters. And as you can see, for the Yveltal, plays a good part in some of the times when I had to be fighting. You can either chip at a person's shield, or I can just simply stop them in their tracks. And some of the times when I end up using Teleport, it's a better idea to be able to use it to either gain distance or try to predict an opponent trying to attack you. But that does require a lot of timing to do at all times. And he tried to taunt to be able to think I was going to attack. Got caught off guard for that. That is punishable, and that actually closes it. Most oftenly, Gardevoir does have great strengths in that department of playing that guessing game. But there's some cases that Gardevoir can have a hard time against opponents that play that game, play that same guessing game that she likes playing. Which I'm going to actually bring up in my next matchup coming real shortly. In the next one, we're going to be talking about Decidueye versus Gardevoir, or one random one I actually picked out. This matchup is actually a little bit hard for Gardevoir, because in this case, Decidueye does play that guessing game, but it's much harder for her because of the fact Decidueye is much more evasive. Can play much more like an outboxer. Decidueye can outpredict your own predictions, in a way. Like, Gardevoir is the fortune teller, but Decidueye is the oracle, in a way. Like, as you can see, this Gardevoir is trying to keep him at bay, but since the Decidueye know that he's not going to be able to outclass projectiles, he's just going to simply do is play his cards and be able to know when I'm going to mess up. That's one thing that Gardevoirs have that's a main weakness, is by trial and error. Meaning that most people will just wait for a right opening in a pattern movement that Gardevoirs would use to punish them by. As you can see there. You can also see is that it makes it hard for me to end up using my projectile game, even though that it's going to cause chip damage. It's not going to yield good results. Because he's going to keep on doing either blocking or throwing some sort of spirit shackle at me. So I would try to use Yveltal in a way just to get more chip damage or try to catch him off guard, but that didn't work. See what I mean? He would end up doing is that one thing that Gardevoirs have is a big weakness, is getting out-predicted. The idea for Gardevoir is being able to keep a calm head, but the awful idea is having matchups that the opponent will try to out-predict you. As you can see here, he didn't really have anything else to do to attack me. Or attack the Gardevoir at all. Her moves are great, but they do lack an idea. They lack, the idea is that her moveset is great. But the problem is that the moveset is unsafe, so when every time I had to engage, I had to be very careful when trying to plan out my attacks. Because my attacks are going to be very punishable. Heck, anytime if I do my second jump, as previously seen, I can get shot out from it. So I had to play the game of being patient. Gardevoirs have to play two games, the guessing game and the patience game, because they know they can't outspeed any other mon. So they have to wait for their moment to attack, even if it means taking punishment themselves. That just makes it a big disadvantage for Gardevoirs towards Decidueye, is the fact that they're cancels. And as you can see, Yveltal does play a good part in her support set, because it does break away either attackers that would be aggressive towards you, or just providing more pressure towards the opponent's shield, because Gardevoir can break shields at any given moment. And as you can see also, her burst attack is capable of hitting at a range, which one thing I forgot to mention. One thing that's very great about her burst attack, regardless of where it's going to hit, it will hit you regardless. If it were close range, it will hit you. Medium range, it would hit you. Long range, it'll still hit you. Heck, if I was on the other side of the planet, somehow Gardevoir's burst attack will still hit me. It's like a heat seeker. So the only thing you can do for a long distance projectile attack is to block it. And it seems that this Decidueye is playing a lot for its money against a Gardevoir that is limiting her options in projectile attacks. Every time when she does his Calm Mind, she gets Spirit Shackled. And the cancels make it harder for her to be able to predict which movies she's going to go for. So it does make it hard, but it just needs you just need a much more patient game. But in this case, Decidueye might have more of a gain to this because the fact he has much more versatility and agility. This Gardevoir doesn't have much left. Only a little good more attacks and this thing's done for. And that did the trick. Okay, kind of a recap. For being a low tier fighter, Gardevoir shows great deals of resentment of showing a lot of power, versatility, and a lot more variety in her moves. Her strengths that her being a predictor and being able to outmaneuver your opponents and being able to know which attack is coming out first is very unique. Even though she can be outpredicted, you should not be able to take Gardevoir easily. Because if you know, Gardevoirs are not going to go down lightly if you know her moveset. They'll go down fighting before they'll give up.